I've been learning so much this week. I mean, I have all my fingers and toes crossed that it really is, well, maybe not all of them, but just sometimes you get a little bit of a breakthrough and you just hope that, okay, this clears the field for a while. We can go walking across it. And I'm hoping, oh God, I'm hoping that that dam has finally broken. I felt the pressure building, and I felt it over the last few years. A lot of mental stress, because the ego just really clamping down and trying desperately. It can feel, the divine water kind of undermining the foundation. It can feel it, it can sense it, and it just, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving. and it's gotten really intense in the last, I guess, in the last year or so. And I feel like this week Mother has shown some things and just opened some inner doors that, oh, what a relief it would be if it holds. You see how weak my faith is? That's how I think. If it holds, there could be some cool things. I had this we're this Sunday we're doing a day-long retreat up near Red Rocks. And I was sitting there thinking this morning, and I just, this, we'll say an idea. I feel like Mother showed this to me as an example. She was trying to show me how to use the mind in a surrendered state. You don't have permission to use your own mind. Well, you do, in one sense. Certainly you can do it anytime you want. But when Thakur told Girish, to give the Lord his power of attorney, that literally meant that Girish didn't have access to his own mind, and without permission. And to take that not as a metaphor, that's the truth. That if you take that path, you don't have permission to use even your own mind, to even generate a single thought without the permission of the divine. And I was kind of contemplating this notion, because that's what I've been working on this week, is what I called in my 2 vlogs ago, that idea of standing on the shore of the mind and watching every impetus toward thinking. Watch everything as it happens, and you can see where all of your problems come from. That way you can see them at the source, if you can remember to be aware. That's what our practice is about remembering to stand on the shore. Don't jump into your thinking. Your thinking takes your feet off of the ground. It takes your feet off of your stability. And that sounds so weird to someone who doesn't talk about these things much. Stop thinking. Don't get caught up in your thinking. But I saw this morning, Mother showed me, because I was trying to think of a way how to talk about that at the retreat on Sunday, because I really want to share some of these ideas. And so I thought, if you have this big bowl, just a clear glass bowl full of water, if you take a pebble and drop it in that water, it just makes a little bit of a splash at the top and then just sinks to the bottom, and it's over. It no longer affects the water, right? So if the water is the mind and that pebble is a thought, that pebble being dropped in the water and going to the bottom is like a thought that you're not attached to. It stays self-contained. It doesn't stir up the rest of the water. It doesn't continue on as an entity. It has its one momentary ripple, then it's finished, goes to the bottom, sits there, no more effect. If you were to take like a drop of dye and drop that drop of dye into the water, it would change the whole mood of the whole bowl, right? And it would get mixed in with everything else, and it would give you the sense of a color, that the water has now become a color. That's like a thought that gets dropped into the mind that you're attached to. And by attached to means that you put your I with it. That's my thought. And you get interested in that thought. And that thought, now that you're living, because once you've attached to a thought, you're no longer standing on the shore of your mind. you're now in it. You've left Atman behind. In one sense, you've left the presence, the thought of the memory of the presence of the divine behind. You've jumped into mind, and the mind takes a color, which means takes a disposition at that point that is related to that thought that you were attached to. And the color and the swirling is because a thought that you're attached to drags with it many other thoughts that then kind of come in as a group of thoughts. And if you're in that attachment, you step off of the shore, you step off of your awareness of self, of your unchanging, immortal self. You step off and you're now part of this cloud of color. And everything that you observe from that point takes on the color of the thought at the center of the cloud of attachment that you are wrapped up in thinking about all these other ideas that this attached thought is inspiring and bringing about. And God forbid, if it's a really big attached thought, a thought that you're really, really attached to, you'll start planning and start projecting into the future your ideas around that thought, and you carry it with you, and you just get caught in this bowl of color. You're no longer in a clear mind. You're no longer established at the side where you can see the beginnings, the very beginnings of thought, and be able to just, I have a phrase, let me share that. I haven't put any of this stuff together in any coherent thinking, as you can sort of tell, but there's a thing I've been saying all week. It's like, resist nothing, but let it go. You know, so that when a sensation comes into the body, or a thought of an attachment, something you've enjoyed, comes into the mind, don't resist. Don't push against it. That causes interaction, that causes disturbance. Resist nothing, which means accept this moment perfectly with whatever arises in it, but let it go immediately. Even if that thought that you of enjoyment, you know, might cause some panic, like, oh my God, don't go down that road. You know, run over and bar the door. No, not that. That's the normal way that we fight our passions and whatnot. But that's not the. I don't want to give an absolute like that. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think there's a period where that's the only choice we have, because we're so caught in mind, we don't have any other choice except to react. But you don't want to react. You know, react is karma. Reacting is karma. So you want to accept the thought, accept anything, let it go through you. Just don't hold on to it. You know, if that wave of pleasure goes through the body, don't think of it. Don't wish for more of it. Don't think about enhancing it. Don't think about what you could do with it. Don't think anything. Just appreciate it as it is and let it go. It's like the smell of pizza, right? From that age-old example. Don't resist the smell of pizza, even though it arises. Even though it could arise all sorts of attachments and desire for pizza, don't let it. Just enjoy the smell of pizza and let it go. Don't hold on. And it goes. It just goes. It doesn't have to produce that wave of karma that it normally does of an attachment, where you start thinking about it and longing for it and wanting it and then planning to get it and making efforts to get that stuff together so you can have that piece of pizza. Don't do that. Just enjoy the smell of pizza and keep walking. You know, so as you watch your mind, as you find that silent place, which I keep going back to that's so important to know through faith at first, that you have within you a chapel, a chapel, a real refuge, a place that you can go and just enjoy the ever-present gentle bliss of God presence, of isness. And if you can stand in that place and watch your mind, you're all powerful. You're all free. The mind does not get big enough to take charge. Your delusions don't get full enough to become engaging. And as long as you sit there just watching and watching and watching, letting it flow to meet this world, because you're basically looking at Maya. You're looking at Shakti. You know, the mind, the mind is the playground of Shakti. Impure mind is Shakti. It's the power of God. And you stand there on the edge and you just watch the constant change. And the constant change never repeats. It's always new, always fresh. And you meet it with the same kind of attention, always new, always fresh, no baggage, no holding on, no memory, no hoping, no anything. You just sit there in constant contact with a constantly changing manifestation of the divine. And you stand there with that knowing that you're watching this constant flow of this ever-changing manifestation of the divine. And you accept the fact that it's pure love, that it's pure wisdom, and the existence you experience. You are in direct contact with divinity at that moment. You are with God. And that's why Vivekananda says, stop seeking God, stop looking for him. You haven't seen anything else but God. Just stop seeing everything else and just know that you're in the presence. Just know that and let that have its effect, which is peace, which is a contentment, which is a fullness, which is wonderful. And so this idea, don't let the thoughts arise in your mind, let them go. Let them be a stone that just falls through mind and sits at the bottom unchanged. Don't let your thoughts become like a drop of dye that then begin to expand and begin to draw in everything else, and then soon you've colored the whole mind. That's Thakur's idea anyway. That story about the guy at the dyer at the market. There's a whole bunch of people in line and they're giving the guy their piece of cloth that they want dyed. And he says, oh, what color do you want this cloth dyed? And the first guy says, oh, I don't know, chartreuse. I guarantee you he didn't say chartreuse, but he did in this story. And he drops his cloth in that bucket, and out it comes a nice chartreuse cloth. And the next guy comes behind it and he wants a blue one, and the guy dips it in the same bucket, pulls out a blue one. And the guy walks away with it. And then the guy who's standing in the back line watching this, seeing this, when it gets to his turn, he tells he's a spiritual seeker. He's like, I don't want any color. I want the color that's in the bucket. And so and that's the notion. It's like your mind is that white piece of cloth. The thoughts that you have that you're attached to are the dyes in your bucket. And whatever thought you accept and attach to will color your mind with that attachment. And that is why it is a veil, because that's the birth of ego. That's the moment when you can't see the divine anymore. You've left the shore of the mind. You're no longer watching thought. You're engaged in thought. And as you're engaged, you're carried away and you lose your bearing. And if you don't at least have a practice, practice at least guarantees at least a couple of times a day that we sort of put our toe out there to try and touch that shore, try and find that stability. And then we get at least get a touch of it, before we get whisked away in the day. But if you have no practice, your life is just a whirl. Nobody, everybody comes to talk to you. The first subtle question in their mind is like, oh boy, what mood does Swami see in today? That's a volatile mind. That's a mind with no foundation. It's like you never know what you're going to get from that person when you see them, very moody. And so establish yourself in this quiet shrine. Watch your mind diligently. Don't let it begin a single thought without you noticing. Because the wonderful thing is you get to see the source of all of your biggest troubles. You get to see where they start. You can see them as a fledgling idea. And it's so wonderful to be able to just go over, just put your finger on it and remove it, just let it whoosh, let it go, just watch it. Oh, there it is. Look, that's why I always struggle with that thing. I'll be darned. Look at that. And it floats off. It goes unaffected, but you've watched it and you've seen something very important, that your biggest troubles in life start with a pinpoint size of a thought, like a mote of dust that floats in front of your attention. And if you can withdraw, if you can focus again on your feet on the beach, stay grounded, which means breathe, feel the infinite of isness, feel the silence of mind, feel the love engendered in all of it surrounding you. Bring your mind back to that. Say your mantra a few times, but say your mantra like well, anyway, I won't go into that. We'll leave that. I got to start class. Wait. Goodness gracious. Here I'm talking about non-attachment, and I'm deeply attached to everything I want to tell you. All right. So Zen mind, beginner's mind. I had to sit for a few minutes this morning and remember what book I was supposed to pick up. Right understanding. Okay, well, hopefully this is what he's going to talk about today. Right understanding. Let me pin myself since I always forget. Here we go. All right. Part 3, right understanding. Our understanding of Buddhism is not just an intellectual understanding. True understanding is actual practice itself. And I think we could safely take that whole conversation we've had, very one-sided as it was, take that conversation and put it in this category, right understanding, because it's an understanding that starts with the knowledge of self, an awareness of presence, awareness of isness, awareness of the moment, of God. All right, the first chapter, traditional Zen spirit. If you are trying to attain enlightenment, you are creating and being driven by karma. This is very important. And you are wasting your time on your black cushion. Yes, right? There's so much that he said along these lines in previous chapters, but it's summed up in that notion that we don't do our practice, we don't do anything, right? And Karma Yoga comes in and teaches us that this is much broader than just practice, but we don't do anything with a gaining idea. We don't do anything to get anything, because there's a lie behind that. If you're doing something to get something, it's because you're lying to yourself. And that lie is that you need something, that you are not complete the way that you are, that you are not divine in your nature. Either you're not divine or you're divine with a God that's too small for you. Those are your choices. If you have a desire, then you have to understand that your God has either disappeared or your God has gotten too small for you. And if either one of those is not okay with you, then stop your desire and return to the feet of the beloved, because you have within you the ability to be content under all conditions, because you're not a body and you're not a mind. So your contentedness does not get measured by the contentedness of a body or the contentedness of a mind. You are separate and apart from those, and that is the truth, and it is real. It is experienceable, and it is one of the helpful things we discover along the line, because once that begins to become clear to us, oh, the whole world starts to rattle, actually. The reality of everything becomes questionable. And that's when the that's when the sport really starts. You know, when you start getting close down to the goal on the soccer field, then everybody's engaged in the game. When that ball's out there in the middle being kicked around, it's a good time to go get your popcorn. But when that ball gets down toward one of those goals, man, the stands are going crazy, the defense is turned on, the offense is I'm totally pretending I know anything about soccer, but the offense is turned on and all the intensity goes. Well, that's that's as it is when you step inside, right? And you come to know, you start to suspect in a real way, not just in an intellectual way, you start to suspect in a real way that some of these things we've talked about might actually be true. And you begin to see that they're experienceable, then, boy, everything steps up in its intensity. The ego starts getting really nervous and starts coming up with lots of desires and lots of things and lots of reasons and lots of purposes and lots of ideas, and just starts shoving anything across the table at you, and then you sit on the other side just not knowing what to do because it's all so new. And that's why we count on grace. to navigate that situation. That's when you just turn around and grab mother's leg and be like, come on, Mom. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so if you are trying to attain enlightenment, all right, if you've got that gaining idea, even about your practice, you're being driven by karma, by a story that has lied to you and told you that God is not present in you, that you are not with God now, that you whatever. That's enough of a lie. That'll take care of it. And if you persist with that idea, if you don't notice you're gaining idea, then he says your sitting is in vain. Now that's if he says that to you, it's true. If I say that to you, really what I'm saying is nothing is in vain. Nothing is lost, because even if you sit there doing it wrong for a long time, at some point it's going to occur to you that it's wrong, and that made it all worth it. If you grow from it, it was worth it. If you get some understanding from it, then it was necessary. And that's why that's why in Buddhism, I was talking to a Buddhist, and I was saying, he was just a Vedantist monk, which is always a fun way to start a conversation with a Buddhist. But that Buddha was just a Vedantist monk. And he said, oh, no, because he tried all that stuff from Hinduism and it didn't work for him. That's how he found the middle path. That's why he stopped all that austerity and stuff. And I said, well, how do you know that? You can't isolate that decision or that learning from the rest of his life. I said, it might have been all those years of trying all of that austerity and intensity that led him to the knowledge of the middle path. You can't say that was nothing because he learned this. It could be because of all of that he learned or saw or understood this, and so not to isolate those things. And a Vedantist monk is nothing in and of itself, right? I mean, a Christian monk is a Vedantist monk, a Buddhist monk is a Vedantist monk. We all are. Of course, I would say a Muslim monk, but there's no Muslim monks that I know of. But the most important thing in our practices, the most important things in our practice are our physical posture and our way of breathing. My goodness. Well, Kim comes here. Those are the most important things in his practice. Now, why would he say that? Anybody want to venture? Why would your posture be one of the most important things in this practice? Anybody want to stand up and sing a song by yourself for a minute?
Well, they say that if your spine needs to be straight, and you need to be comfortable if you're in however way you're sitting. So if you straighten your spine, it helps the energy to flow better. And if you're comfortable in the way you're sitting, whether you choose to sit on the floor or on a chair, your body doesn't bother you. And at the same time, it's a good seat. Like if you're sitting on the floor and you like to sit on the floor, you feel you're ready for meditation in a psychological way. If you're sitting on a chair because you have hip issues, that's better for you. So the body is kind of very comfortable and out of the way.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I'm going to add the thing that what makes all of that important is that you have to come into the present to consider the condition of your posture. And if you're doing it properly, your body will fix itself, right? As you sit there and simply put your awareness, like even right now, think about how you're sitting right now. Think about nothing else but how you're sitting. Feel the places where the tension is, and you'll start sitting up straighter. You'll pull your head back a little bit. You'll center it on your backbone. It becomes an awareness of the moment. And by thinking about your posture in its current state, you can feel this natural dialogue that begins to happen it's actually between you and the divine, but it seems like it's between you and the body. Well, as the body tells you how to sit, oh, wait, a little bit more, hips back, sit up straight. So you get that. And then all the things that you say are true. You're then comfortable. The mind doesn't get distracted by the body. Your legs aren't going to hurt and make you feel like it's time to get up from practice, even though you've been there only 39 seconds. You get this understanding, and you get this dialogue, and you become accustomed to what it means to be present, to be here, not to be here. So that's why your form is so important, because it starts that dialogue. It brings you out of the spinning mind. It brings you into the moment. And it puts you in that mode of adjustment where you are aligning yourself with presence, with being. That's awareness. And not only will that do that with your body, but we do it first with our body because that's where most of us are attached, right? That's where we live, is in our bodies. So we're using that attachment, we're using that awareness to bring us out of the mind, to remind us of this ever-present present, and to go into communion with that present, listening, hearing, and responding, expressing, right? And so that's that posture. And then he says our way of breathing. Again, it brings you out of the head. It brings you into the moment, and breathing is such a spiritual metaphor for almost everything. One of my favorites is, I'm always big on bringing the Garden of Eden into the whole situation. And, when God created you, in the scriptures, the metaphor is that God breathed his breath into Adam, and gave him life. That's how God created Adam. And so, as you know that story, I like to take that story out of history and say that the Garden of Eden story happens perpetually, right? Every moment. And every time that you make the mistake of going into your senses and looking at the world and seeing objects of desire and getting them, you're going through the motions of Eve in the fall. And unfortunately, you suffer the results of that. And so this banishment from Eden is continually happening with us as long as we stay off in the mind of duality, in the knowledge of good and evil, and we don't stand on the shore within, in companionship with the beloved. So this breathing is, when you inhale each time, it's a thought, it's a play. You can imagine God breathing his breath or her breath into you. At that moment, your life is created. At that moment, your life is sustained. At that moment, your presence in the garden is established, your isness with God and that intimacy. So every time you take a breath in, think of it in that sense. Think of it that this is the life, this is the divine in this moment, sustaining my life, giving me existence, giving me love, giving me wisdom, and you imbibe that and know it. And it's not an act that you're doing because your breathing happens quite autonomously. It doesn't need you there to do it. Which is a confusing thought. But nonetheless, God breathing his life into you in each moment. So as we practice, as we sit down first to do our practice, posture is always a good thing. Bring yourself into the room, bring yourself into the moment, bring yourself into your body, feel it, set it up, respond to it, let it tell you what it needs, make the adjustments, get yourself established, then bring it inside and go to the breath, right? Bring the presence of the beloved, understand the intimacy of him, of her, breathing that breath of life into you. Know the nature of it to be divine love, unconditioned. Know the nature of it to be beautiful wisdom, and just sit in that space and just be with the beloved, your divine, your essence, your truth, your fullness, the contentment, the peace without understanding. Those are the tools that bring you and help you to arrive at the reality. The reality is the moment, in the moment where you meet your isness. All right, so the most important things in our practice are our physical posture and our way of breathing. We are not so concerned about a deep understanding of Buddhism. Why? Because a deep understanding of anything is just a bunch of stuff up here, a bunch of boxes on a shelf that you run to when you want to know something. Oh, let's see, what box was that in? Oh, this one. Oh, wait, that's got a reference to a box over there. Let me go get that. And the more boxes you have with notes that reference each other, the deeper your understanding of a subject is. Not what we're going for, kids, not what we're going for. As a philosophy, Buddhism is a very deep, wide, and firm system of thought. But Zen is not concerned about philosophical understanding. We emphasize practice. We should understand why our physical posture and breathing exercise are so important. Instead of having a deep understanding of the teaching, we need a strong confidence in our teaching, which says that originally we have Buddha nature. Our practice is based on this faith. That's nice to see in Buddhism, a path, a Jnana path, the path of Jnana, that they're still using faith, and they're still using the idea of the divine in there. So what is our faith? Our faith is that we already are the Buddha nature, right? That allows us to sit and practice without the idea of gaining, of grasping. It's the knowledge I sit here already with everything. Nothing is needed. Yes, there's some ignorance up here because I don't experience it, I don't see it, I don't know it, whatever that is. But faith pushes that out of the room, and you just accept the fact that you are whole. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to reason about it. You don't have to wonder what's missing. You don't have to try and fix it. Not because you're experiencing the truth of it yet, but because of faith. You accept the fact, I am the pre-fallen Adam. I am that ever pure, ever blissful self. You know, Vivekananda says after many of his lectures, this thing should be exerted constantly. You should be saying this to yourself all the time. I am the ever free, ever pure Atman. Know it to be true. And that gives you the pot of stew to sit in. Our practice is based on this faith. Before Bodhidharma went to China, almost all the well-known stock words of Zen were in use. For instance, there was the term sudden enlightenment. Sudden enlightenment is not an adequate translation, but tentatively I will use the expression. Enlightenment comes all of a sudden to us, right? The way Sri Ramakrishna said, it's like if you're in a dark room and you turn on that light switch, that room could have been dark for 10,000 years, but as soon as you hit that light switch, boom, that room is lit. You don't have to sit there and watch the light gradually make its way across the room. It's instantaneous. So he says, enlightenment comes all of a sudden to us. This is true enlightenment. Yeah, it's like that aha. There's several ways to experience that. The ones that are most common to talk about, do you know those stereograms that you look at and you kind of focus at a point between you and the stereogram and it crosses your eyes? And as soon as you cross your eyes, the image that you're actually looking at takes on a third dimensional quality. Have you done that? Do you know those games? We used to have a book of those in the monastery. Of course, the simpler one is that drawing where if you see the black as negative space, you see two white faces looking at each other. But if you see the white as the negative space, you see a lamp. And when you're first shown that picture, if you can ever possibly remember when the first time was, you couldn't see it. You were like, what do you mean it's two faces? It's just a lamp. And you sit there looking at it, and then all of a sudden, boom, you see the faces. And from that point on, you can see whichever one you want. You can see them both at the same time, but up until that moment, you see only one. You see only the faces or only the lamp. And so our enlightenment is very much like that, apparently. It's not that you learned anything different. It's not that you got more information. It's that you understood it was the way of seeing that had to switch, right? It wasn't the information that had to change. It was the way of seeing it that had to change. And once that change happened, boom, it was instantaneous. The world will never be same again for you. You will always see a lamp and faces in that diagram. And so hopefully that's not all it is. But when when we come to this enlightenment, it'll be like that. It's not a new piece of information. It's not even a new understanding. It's just suddenly you take a step to the left and you're standing in the position of the divine perspective. And then you understand very differently everything that you've always been looking at. All of that remains the same, right? Mother says you don't grow a pair of horns. There's nothing going to be different about you. You're just going to have a perspective of truth, which will be the first, a perspective that's not tied to an attachment, that's not being dragged through the mind. Before Bodhidharma, people thought that after a long preparation, sudden enlightenment would come. Thus, Zen practice was a kind of training to gain enlightenment. Actually, many people today are practicing Zazen with this idea, but this is not the traditional understanding of Zen. The understanding passed down from Buddha to our time is that when you start Zazen, there is enlightenment, even without any preparation. Whether you practice Zazen or not, you have Buddha nature. Because you have it, there is enlightenment in your practice. The points we emphasize are not the stage we attain, but the strong confidence we have in our original nature and the sincerity of our practice. Is that clear? That's beautifully said. That's beautifully said. That sincerity of practice is that true effort. You're not doing it to get it out of the way. All right. I got such a beautiful lesson on this one time in the shrine. I tell these stories all the time, and I wish I had different ones, but these are the ones I learned. I was cleaning in the shrine. We had one of those Indian shrines where it had, at least 3.5 million lotuses on it. And each of those 3.5 million lotuses had at least 19 petals, and I had to go there and fold up a napkin and, get into each one of those little cracks to get nothing out. Frankly, there was nothing in those cracks, but I had to go make sure that it stayed nothing in those cracks. And I had been doing this, every single day for, at that point, I think it was 8 years. And I pretty much had enough. And I literally sat on the shrine, which I'm sure could have gotten me thrown out of the order, but I literally sat down on the shrine and I folded the napkin and put it on my knee, and I just sat there and I looked sideways to Mother and I said, I'm done with this. This room is the cleanest room in this monastery, and it's the only one that I clean every day. I said, my own room, if I go through and dust it in there once every 10 or 15 days, that's more than enough. I said, why is your room any different? Why can't I just come in here and clean once every 2 weeks and just leave it at that? Nobody would know any different. And I was sitting there, and just this whole barrage of thinking kind of came through, and I began to understand. I felt like Mother told me. Of course, we all have to deal with life as we deal with it. Anyway, my own mind, I heard within there, I heard this idea is like, you're always cleaning the shrine to get it finished. Have you ever thought about cleaning the shrine to spend time with me instead of trying to get it finished? And I sat there and I thought, well, I'll be darned if that's not a truth, and I started thinking, how much of my life, how many things do I do in a day just to get them finished? And this was when this new thought really started to grow in me, because I really started then to try and clean the shrine as time to spend with Mother, as time to spend with the divine, and not as a task that I had to check off and get finished every day. That changed my life. That changed my experience of the shrine, that changed my experience of almost everything that I was doing, because for the first time I got a hint of what it meant to be present. To be present means that you're doing things for their own sake. You're noticing the beauty of them. You're noticing the intensity of them. You're noticing the color and the smell and the flavor and the isness of being, right? But when you're doing a task to get it finished, you're not there. You're at the end. You're living in the future when that task is going to be finished. And so we have to fix this about our own sitting, that through this faith that we are Buddha nature, we are enlightened. That changes the whole experience. You no longer sit to get it finished. You no longer, I remember, sometimes I put a timer on for my meditation, right? And there's sometimes where I wonder if the phone's broken. Because I'll be sitting there, be like, God, I've been here for at least 9 hours, I'm sure of it. And you touch it, you're like, oh my God, I've only been here 8 minutes. But it's sometimes like that. If it's like that, you're not in the present. You're not in the present. You're either maybe thinking about something else, but certainly something that's in there is being finished. Being finished sits in the back of your mind, and that makes time stretch out. You know, when you're waiting for a point in the future, you know, it comes very slowly. My friend Philip is retiring at the end of this school year. He's been counting the days for the last 5 years. And I tell you that now that he's in the last half of his last semester, you know, he has said it's never going to come. It's like it might as well be infinity. Every day seems to crawl by, and I just keep thinking, when is the end of this semester coming? If that's the experience of your practice, if that's the experience of your spiritual life, like, oh God, I've been doing this practice for 40 years and I can't seem to get anywhere. My mind is always noisy, and I sit there and I'm uncomfortable when I sit in the shrine, and every time it's a chore. There's not a big problem with all of that. There's just a very simple problem. You have no faith. You have no faith in your own nature. And you're not able to sit in the company of God and enjoy God as God is with you now, and to enjoy the process of letting a mind relax into its openness, into its natural state, not trying to force it into a singular thought, like I've got to control this thing and make it happen, but in this understanding that you're surrounded at this moment by your beloved, by that which you seek. You are surrounded by that. This love, this unconditioned love that you have looked for in everybody you've ever dated, in every parent you've ever had, in every sibling you've ever known, in every friend that you've cultivated, that pure love that you've always been on the search for is what you're sitting in, is what you're surrounded by. And so you allow that faith to change the very nature of life, that it's not a grasping, running, grabbing, developing, growing, learning thing. It's being. It's being in the middle of the most amazing, unknowable mystery that any novel has ever come up with, that any movie has ever postulated. It's sitting in the midst of all of that, and knowing that it is all from here, all within you, that there's no need for proving love, that there's no need for proving God or proving nothingness or proving anything. It's a complete openness to the wonder of isness, to being, right? And so we sit in our practice to enjoy what we are, and to enjoy the isness of the divine that is never absent, and to come into a space where we remember the depth of the love that we have to share, this infinite source that we don't have to be stingy with. And we let that flow into life. And we let that come out of us in a response to this amazing isness, to this amazing truth. And we are transformed. We're different, without having to go in here and change any of the valves, tighten any of the screws, fix any of the bolts, not have to do any of that. It's the awareness in faith that transforms you. All of that will happen. You'll become a saint effortlessly if you live in the presence, if you simply allow yourself to open to the infinity of now. Because you have it, oh, is it? Yes, because you have it, the enlightenment is in your practice. The points we emphasize are not the stage we attain, but the strong confidence we have in our original nature and the sincerity of our practice. We should practice Zen with the same sincerity as Buddha. If originally we have Buddha nature, the reason we practice Zazen is that we must behave like Buddha. To transmit our way is to transmit our spirit from Buddha. So we have to harmonize our spirit, our physical posture, our activity with the traditional way. You may attain some particular stage, of course, but the spirit of your practice should not be based on an egoistic idea. An egoistic idea means a particular, something to be attained or something to be maintained or something to be gotten rid of, right? Because the Gita tells you that you can't add anything to the soul and you can't remove anything from the soul. So what is it that you're looking for in this world? What is it you think you will find when you've been told very clearly the soul can't be wedded, can't be burned, can't be touched in that way. There's nothing here that could be added or taken from your divine self. So remember that. And maybe, if you're lucky, it will occur to you that you should stop looking for things. According to the traditional Buddhist understanding, our human nature is without ego. When we have no idea of ego, we have Buddha's view of life. That is that enlightenment. That's that perspective that allows you to see the lamp and the faces at the same time, right? So it's a constant change in perspective. It's a nice exercise every now and then to sit in meditation, to sit down and say, you know what? I have everything in this room with me at this moment that is necessary for me to enjoy my enlightenment. Just accept that as your ground of faith and understand that. And then don't go looking for a perspective, because it's the absence of perspective that we want. Perspective always makes an assumption. You have to place yourself in a particular somewhere. We are not that particular. We're ever free, ever pure, ever blissful. We are the Atman, unchanging, absolute. And so you withdraw from perspective. You withdraw from particular. And you come deep within, on the shore of the mind. When you're not in mind, you're not in time. You're in eternity. This moment is eternal. To remove the past and to remove the future from your awareness is to step into the eternal now, this eternal moment. This moment will still be with you and present with you even when your body drops at that moment of death. So in one sense, we talk about everybody dies alone. No, that's not true, because you'll die in a moment, and that moment is your beloved. So that moment will carry through the different barriers that ego has presented. That moment, this isness of God, is always with you, always present, will always be. And your death will be nothing but a change of perspective. You'll come to realize that dumpy, fat, slovenly thing called a body wasn't you. And it'll probably be a pretty big relief, looking at most of you. I barely got a single laugh out of that. I better apologize.
I was laughing.
Okay. All right. So according to the traditional Buddhist understanding, our human nature is without ego. That's very important, without particular, right? When you're not attached to anything, you're free. That's what having an ego means. Ego means the opposite of that. Ego is having attachment. So you have a particular, you have a describable, you have an attribute. Our nature is all attributes or no attributes, either way. That's our nature. There's no particular necessary. When we have no idea of ego, we have Buddha's view of life. Our egoistic ideas are delusion covering our Buddha nature, right? So bring this down. What are these things? Our egoistic ideas. Where do ideas happen? They happen in thought. They happen in a runaway local mind, a mind that's just thinking for the fun of thinking, a mind that's always wondering about everything. And what you really get into trouble with is the mind starts wondering about the things it's wondering about. So it doesn't even need the physical world anymore. It's just caught up in the ideas of ideas. and the ideas about ideas, and then begins wondering about ideas. And pretty soon this creates, creates the weirdest things. I mean, turn on the news at night. That's what thinking has done. Egoistic thinking. The news comes purely out of a report of egoism in the world. That's all it is. And as long as we're involved in ego, as long as we're involved in our local mind of just all these perspectives, we are contributing to war. We are contributing to poverty. We are contributing to hunger, because everything becomes separated and everything about me and mine becomes important in that state of egoistic thinking. Our egoistic ideas are delusion because they're just ideas. All of your desire is only built on a thought, not on anything real. It's a thought. Change the thought, the desire disappears. Change the thought, the hunger goes away. Change the thought, the world around you changes. Not because it changed, but because your perspective changes. Your way of seeing changes. So understand, when you're restless, stop, because you're not going to solve it by doing something. Just stop. Back up. Sit down, think about your posture. Sit down in quiet and listen to your breath. And remember your faith in the divine and the presence, that your existence is his love letter to you, that your longing for love and your ability to recognize love is that note he left for you to tell you of that love. Your wisdom is his whisper, that this intimacy of isness, this intimacy of life is infinite. It's yours. Our egoistic ideas are delusion, covering our Buddha nature. Covering why? Because you can't sense the presence anymore. You're lost in a whirlwind of thinking, a whirlwind of thoughts, of things that aren't real. You're no longer present. God is not in your mind. Isness is not in your mind. Doing is in your mind. Finishing is in your mind. Starting is in your mind. But being is not in your mind. We are always creating and following them. And in repeating this process over and over again, our life becomes completely occupied by ego-centered ideas. We live up here. We live up here, and we don't realize we're living up here. We think that we're seeing the world as it is. You're absolutely not seeing the world as it is if you're up here. Why? How do you know that? Because there's no way you can know what the world is. You are assuming and projecting everything that you see and do and hear. Everything. Yeah. It's very funny because even in a conversation with somebody, you have to be completely deluded, because they're trying to share something from an infinite mind that they're experiencing, and you're trying to hear something about their infinite mind that only they can experience, and you're assuming you understand what they're saying. You have no idea what they're saying. You will never know what they're saying. You will only know what they're saying and how it relates to what you're thinking. That's all you'll ever know, because you'll never be able to step into another mind. You'll never be able to see the thousands of variables that you would need to know in order to understand that person, even in the simplest way. So we walk around constantly full on assumption about everything, full on assumption. If I ask you about Germany, I'll be like, oh, what's Germany like? If anybody, Mick, I didn't mean to pick that in particular. I grew up there, so I was thinking about it. If someone says, what's Germany like? If you have the gall to sit there and even start a sentence that you think you know what Germany is like, without having talked to even 0.0001% of the people that live there, even if you do live there, the number of Germans you've talked to is still a minuscule amount of the Germans that exist, and the history of the country, and all the things that are being thought and happening in the corners of the world that you don't even know about. And you're going to sit there and tell me what Germany is like. You understand ignorance? Do you understand delusion? That's where we live. It's like that with anything. I can ask you on any subject. And if you have the gall to answer, you're a fool in the spiritual sense. And
Swami,
I'll be in a, what's that?
I have a I have a comment and a question.
Please.
Well, then what's the point of any conversation? Because that's
Exactly.
all, then we'd all just be keeping quiet.
Oh my gosh, what a notion. Yeah. Well, here's the thing about that. Yes, and there would be nothing wrong with that. It would be beautiful if it was done with that attention and that knowledge. I think all the arguing would stop for a moment, and we might actually begin to listen to each other. We might actually then be able to hear each other instead of dealing with our own projections on each other constantly, right? In the pregnant knowledge of the silence of the moment is everything that you need to know. Everything is there already in the moment. Sri Nisargadatta makes that statement directly. The moment contains everything necessary for navigating it perfectly. You don't have to go get something else. So yes, it's true. The nature of the world would definitely change. Look at Ramana Maharshi. You know, when I was talking with Swami Damodarananda about his experience in living with Ramana Maharshi for 2 years, that's one of the things he said. He said, when I was away from Ramana Maharshi, I would make up lists of questions that I wanted to ask him. And when I would walk into the room for my time with him and I would sit down in front of him, every single one of my questions left my mind and felt ridiculous. So yes, that's what would happen. You know, that's what would happen. And conversations wouldn't be about ideas and thinking and delusions and comparing delusions and encouraging delusions in each other. It wouldn't be about that. You know, what do you say when there's silence within? You don't say anything. What's expressed is love, because that's what you are when you're nothing else. Pure love. Wisdom would be expressed because that's what you are when you're nothing else, right? But to converse with somebody else in the world, you have to be a man or a woman. You have to be an adult or a child. You have to have an idea or an opinion. You have to have a perspective. You have to have backup for why you think what you think. You have to have a future of why your thinking's correct and where it's going to lead everything and why it's going to work out perfectly. You have to borrow infinite levels of delusion to carry on with the ego. And the ego is happy to provide every bit of it that you need. It will sit there and lie to you continuously and tell you anything necessary. So yeah, there is no point in it all, which is why, you know, there's also no danger that that's going to happen. So we could spin out on that for quite some time, but where would we be? You know, that's the thing. And things happen, you know, because like there was that young brahmachari that told the Holy Mother, I'm going to sit right here on this bench and I'm not going to move until I realize God. And she smiled indulgently at him. And she told him, you can try, but your karma itself is going to throw you out of that bench, throw you off of that bench, you know? That's why it's important to know that you're not the doer. You're riding a wheel of samsara as it rolls down some hill completely out of control. You know, that's why it's not a matter of controlling the way the wheel of samsara rolls. It means surrendering and observing without attachment, without identity. Let your life go on. You will continue, you know, even if you stop your mind, stop your thinking, you're still going to get up on time tomorrow. You're still going to go to work. You're still going to clean your house. You're still going to do your laundry, right? Those things happen. It's not you doing them, but that's the wheel of samsara that you're following, that you're seeing, and it will continue to happen. It's just like your dream. You know, watching yourself do laundry is the same as doing laundry in a dream. You're not doing laundry in the dream. You're not going to have a clean shirt to hold up when you wake up in the morning. Nothing's happening. You're just in the mind, washing laundry in a dream. But you're actually in full repose, laying down, resting, snoring horribly as that, but you're completely unaware of it. So this is life. Doesn't matter in the dream whether you're talking to somebody or not. Doesn't matter whether you have lots of conversations in a night or none. No, the dream will pass as it passes. The story will happen as it happens. And you'll awake in the morning and realize it's just a dream. You don't care one way or the other. It's just what it was. So this is life. It is what it is. The magic of this life is not in what happens, not in the stories being told. The miracle of this life is that it's even being witnessed, that you are there to see it. And when you try and understand what that means, it will take you immediately to love and wisdom and existence. It will take you to your divine nature. And that will be enough, because everything emanates from that. Everything you've ever dreamed of or wanted or thought about came from that reality. This moment, every building built came out of this moment, this same moment. It's a magical thing. You can pull material out of it just by thinking about it, just by acting on your thought. And you can make something appear in this moment that wasn't there a moment ago. But is that important? It's not the pulling things out of the moment, it's the knowing. What is the source of moment? What is this? That's where the wonder and the love lies. That's where fulfillment is. So be there now, as they say. All right. It's 10 o'clock. Oh my gosh. We barely started. All right. So we should not. So your spirit of practice should not be based on an egoistic idea. That's what the last thought we're having for the day. Right there. And we'll pick up from there on some imagined Thursday in an imagined future. Any questions or concerns? Ideas? Corrections? Good jokes? All right, I'm going to stop the recording.